Hello and welcome to Monday Motivation. This is the December 14th edition, and tonight we're going to talk about living in fear. Living in fear. There's so much going on right now with people uh, living in fear because of all that we hear in the news, especially around the COVID-19. And we did talk about fear earlier in the year on one of our broadcasts. You should actually go to our website and check that out. But think it would be good probably to talk about that again. It seems like everywhere we turn nowadays, fear is being pushed on us. How you respond is up to you, but we've got the media pushing it. We've got politicians pushing it. We've got people, drug companies saying you got to do this, you got to do that, and everybody's coming at us from a different point of view, and they're using fear to push things on us. And fear is not something new. I think even in my lifetime, the different things that we've gone through where people have tried to use fear. We've been through a number of pandemics. When I was a kid, they told us there was another ice age coming. A good way to scare a kid. We're all going to freeze. Then there was the energy crisis. Then global warming, and cities are going to be wiped out by rising oceans, and stock market crash, and wars, civil unrest, terrorism. And it goes on and on and on. There's always something to be scared of. There's always somebody pushing fear for some reason. And now, in 2020, what do we get? COVID. We've got a double dose or triple dose of fear being sent to us daily, multiple times a day, and it's always fear, 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 driving us to be more fearful and afraid of what's going on. It seems like every time you turn around, there's another issue to create fear within people. And why does this happen? Why is this? Well, let's first of all acknowledge that fear is real. Everyone is affected by fear. You're affected to some degree, I'm affected to some degree. We're all affected by fear. And fear is very powerful. It's a powerful emotional response when we feel out of control. All of these situations I mentioned, ice age, global warming and wars, those are all things out of our control, and quite often we have an emotional response because we feel out of control in that situation. And that's part of what fear is and why it's so powerful. And then fear could be used to control and manipulate. People use fear quite often to get you to do things you don't want to do. For example, your boss can use fear of losing your job or fear of punishment to get you to do things. It can be a motivator that way. Parents will quite often, and I'm guilty myself, will use fear to motivate our children to do things. And sometimes that can be, a little bit of fear can be healthy, but out of control, fear can be used for manipulative purposes. Quite often, people who fear rejection will do things that are not healthy or stay in relationships that are not healthy because they fear rejection. Fear is a very, very powerful tool. We have people who are scared to go outside. They are living in fear. Now, even in this situation, many of our leaders have good intentions, but there are still leaders and many who would use fear to manipulate and control the population to push their agenda. Think about that. If somebody has an agenda, fear is an excellent tool to push that agenda. Most leaders are good, but there are some who have an agenda, and they are using it to push that agenda. Media is a huge factor in pushing fear. Why do they do it? It boosts ratings. People are glued. They got to find out what's next. What's next? What's next? What's happening now? People are glued. It boosts ratings. For some reason, our human nature, that fear draws us, and we want to find out more, and we're hanging on to every little word they say. Now, don't get me wrong. There's often an element of truth. There is truth within much of what they use to create fear, but the truth has to be in balance. And quite often it's one-sided, it's selectively giving the facts to push the fear side of it without giving the full story or the full idea of what's going on. So we can't just ignore it either. For example, climate change and environmental issues, we can't ignore that. We can't ignore COVID. So it's not a case of we can bury our head in the sand and ignore these issues, but we need to have balance. We need to get all of the facts. Thoughts, comments, we'd love to hear from you. If you're watching live on Facebook or YouTube, leave your comments in the comments section. Let us know what you think. Are you fearful? How do you respond to fear? On YouTube here, King LJ, Larry, I know Larry, you're doing great. How do you respond to fear? Facts. Get the facts. Good point. So what can we do? Well, here's something to think about. When you feel yourself getting afraid, you're watching a newscast, you're listening to a conversation, when you feel your fear coming in, stop. Put the brakes on, put a stop to it right away. Get control of your thoughts, get control of your mind. If that doesn't work, turn the TV off, leave the conversation. But as soon as you feel yourself getting afraid and fear is taking over and starting to control you, stop. Give yourself permission to stop. That's the first thing you need to do. Then, few ideas. Stop taking in all of the hype and everything that's going on around the issue. A lot of it is opinion, it's hype, it's selectively giving the facts. Ephesians 4:14. Then we will no longer be infants, tossed back and forth by the waves, and blown here and there by every wind of teaching, and by the cunning and craftiness of people in their deceitful scheming. We don't need to be blown around, blown back and forth. We don't need to be overcome by fear. You have permission to stop. Take control of your thoughts. Take control of what's feeding your thoughts. Stop. Now, don't bury your head in the sand either. A lot of these are issues that we need to be aware of. But, number 2, research the facts from multiple reliable sources. It could be media, it may be not. But go to multiple sources that are reliable. Okay? Often the best sources are those who are independent and have nothing to gain. If your source is somebody who's going to gain from fear, of course they're going to present it the way they want you to hear it. Get the facts. Do your research. Do your homework. Don't take other people's word for granted. Look for balance in the facts. Often only one side of the facts are presented, or they're selectively presented. Dig deeper. If there's 2 sides to an issue or multiple sides, get both sides of the issue. Verify the facts. If it's an opinion, take it as that. But don't take opinions as fact. Especially on social media. If I see something that looks interesting, I'll always go back and double check it against a source. And if I can't find that source, that leads me to think, let's put that one aside for now. Number 4, realize that fear is not from God. Fear is not from God. Fear is something from the enemy used to control, used to intimidate. But fear is not from God. God has promised that He will never leave us or forsake us. God will never leave us or forsake us. But that takes faith. Do you trust Him? Do you trust God? Hebrews 13:6. So we can confidently say, the Lord is my helper. I will not fear. What can man do to me? The Lord is my helper. I will not fear. What can man do to me? We read that in church. We hear that. But there are times where we actually have to put it into practice. And this is one of those times. Number 5, seek wisdom. Research, do your research, study the issue, ask God for wisdom. James 1:5, if any of you lacks wisdom, you should ask God, who gives generously to all without finding fault, and it will be given to you. God says if you ask for wisdom, he'll give it to you. You don't need to beg, you don't need to plead, you don't need to guess, but you do have to do your part. You can't just throw everything at God and say, here, God, deal with it. He gave you a mind. He gave you skills. You also have to do your research. But in the end, ask God for wisdom. Ask him for discernment. What is fact? What is fiction? And then once you've done that, number 6, confidently plan the best course of action. Evaluate and adjust as necessary. So, for example, in this COVID situation, if you want to wear a mask, if you've done your research and you decide that's the best option, do it. Vaccines are coming out now. Do your research and decide accordingly. Ask for wisdom. God, what is the best course of action? Don't just take information, especially from biased sources, blindly. Do your research. Ask God for wisdom. James 1:5, ask, he will give it to you. Question. We talk about trusting God, but how is your relationship with God? Can you call him Father? God says we are his children. He is our Father. Can you confidently trust him and go to him for wisdom when times get rough? Is your relationship with God strong enough that you can trust him when times get rough? If not, we're going through a rough time right now. You need to develop that relationship. How? If you've never asked for forgiveness and asked God to be a part of your life, that's the first step. Reach out to us. We can help you with that if you need help. In the comments, in our feedback form. But yeah, reach out. Number 2, if you have started that relationship by asking God for forgiveness, you need to develop that relationship through prayer, through Bible study, through being involved in a Bible study group, involved in a local church. You need to develop that relationship. I don't know if things are going to get worse before they get better. I'm not a prophet. I don't know. But things are tough right now. And this is a time where we have to exercise our faith, exercise our trust in God. And if you don't have that faith and that trust, it's time to work on that relationship. God he's not mad at you. He's not punishing you, but he does reach out to you and he wants to have a relationship with you. Work on developing that relationship. I'll talk more about that later, but if you want to talk more about it in the meantime, reach out to me through private messaging or through our feedback form. I'd love to talk to you more about it. Finally, I'll leave you with Deuteronomy 31:6. Be strong and courageous. Do not be afraid or terrified because of them, for the Lord your God goes with you. He will never leave you or forsake you. God is there, but it's up to us to reach out and take his promises and have a relationship with him so that we can go to him for wisdom, so that we can have faith, so that we can trust him. I leave that with you. Be strong and courageous. Thoughts, comments? Any comments that come in later, I will read them. Mike Hartwick. Hello, Mike, if you're watching. Glad that you're here with us. Few comments from Larry. It's good to separate facts from fiction, definitely. And definitely, thank you. Thank you for the comments. I will read any comments that are done afterwards. Our website, monday-motivation.ca. If you want to look at past editions, if you want to look at the previous episode on fear, all of our past editions are on the website, monday-motivation.ca. If you want to leave some private feedback, there's a feedback form there. We will respond. And this week, have a great week. There is no need to live in fear. We live on God's promises, but at the same time, use wisdom, use discernment, trust God for wisdom. Have a great week. Don't live in fear, live in peace, and we will see you next week on Monday Motivation.